Hey, Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time, again with a quote by Lao Tze. He writes, "Failure is an opportunity. If you blame someone else, there is no end to the blame. And therefore the master fulfills her own obligations and corrects her own mistakes. She does what she needs to do and demands nothing of others." How do you relate to this quote and demanding nothing of others? Sounds
Sometimes easier said than done. Yes, I think this is some good wisdom. The Tao Te Ching brings the heat with the wisdom, and I can say I've tried both ways here. I've tried blaming others. I've tried not blaming others, and failure is an opportunity. If you blame others, there is no end to the blame. This describes something true in my experience. When we are caught up in a victim story, when we're caught up in pointing fingers at others, when we're caught up in blaming others, there really is this drinking salt water kind of effect from it, where there is no satisfaction in it in the end. When we blame others and play the victim, it creates a cycle that can kind of ensnare us and lead us to blame others more and more and more that actually does not serve us. No matter how true the origin of the story may be, it helps us and serves us and strengthens us to let go and to fulfill our own obligations, correct our own mistakes, do what we need to do, and demand nothing of others. This, I think, is a high level of mastery, a high level of walking with wisdom that is not culturally conditioned for us. And demanding nothing of others does free ourselves in the end. And it's hard to know when to strike the right balance with this and how to be authentic and communicate and set expectations and to to express what needs to be done at the same time within demanding nothing of others, within coming to a peace and an acceptance with the way that things are and doing our part with trust in the universe. What do you think is required if we are to do what we need to do and demand nothing of others? How do we access that way of being, or what can get in the way of that?
what can get in the way of that is probably our attachment to certain kinds of outcomes or expectations of expecting others to behave a certain way. I think it is a similar approach to forgiveness. If you release your anger, you will be better off. If you release your expectations of others and your demand on others, you will be a better off because you still have the ability to synchronize. You still have the ability to place incentives right. And then things will take care of itself. So if you take the system approach and the systematic view and change your perspective, then it's better possible to really trust, place the trust in the system you create, place the trust in the level of synchronicity you gained by getting really in sync with others and discussing a topic to the point where both of you know the values of each other and then regulate their own expectations, needs, and demands in a way which balances out. It can be like that. It's hard to reach, but I think this could be similar to forgiveness, where if you don't demand anything of others, then you will free yourself that way. And yeah, what would you add, Peyton? What would you add?
It ties into the holistic relationship with reality that the Tao Te Ching points to. This let go of fixed plans and concepts, and the world will govern itself. This give yourself up to whatever the moment brings. I think it has a lot to do with the perspective that reality arises exactly as it is. The other people have done what they have done. The past is already there in the past. The present is already here. somebody that is breaking their word, or somebody that is not doing what we expect them to, or somebody that is letting us down in our own mind in some way. That's already here. That's already reality. Certainly, if it's happened in the past, it's already reality. And so the question that we have in front of us, our agency, really isn't in changing the past because it's futile. We cannot do it. It doesn't work. It's really about bringing ourselves into alignment with the reality that's actually unfolding. And that is the basis for our greatest agency. It's not that reality is unfolding just as we wish it was. A lot of times. A lot of times, there is something that we're tempted to blame other people for good reason. There is something that is unjust that has happened. There is something wrong that has happened. There is something that is frustrating or hurtful or unrighteous or unjust or whatever that is going on in the past or the present. And yet, at the same time, given this reality, given where we find ourselves, given what somebody else has done, what are our options and what fruit will those options bear? This is where this lucidity that the Tao Te Ching invites us to becomes a source of hidden strength, because we're programmed to say, no, force reality to be exactly as you want it to be. Blame other people, fight against it. If somebody tells you the wrong thing, struggle and demand and go red in the face and fight tooth and nail for what's yours. But what are the fruit that that way bears? I find in my own experience, having tried both ways, that yes, it is a shame um, when people do wrong by us. Yes, it is a shame when people are blameworthy in their actions or do not act in integrity or do the wrong thing toward us, at least in our view. But what will be the most helpful once we notice that? We do find ourselves in that reality sometimes. And so, what are we to do that is the best working with what we've got and to accept, to come to a clear awareness and a whole diving into reality as it actually is, including the reality as other people are arising within it, them being a part of the reality that we encounter, and making first a some level of baseline truce with the way that things are, and then moving forward from there. This is how we can maximize our power, our energy, our agency. This is the surrender and the trust that can actually give us far more power than we would seem. It feels like the powerful thing to do is to fight tooth and nail for what you want. But actually, that saps our power, and a lot of times it doesn't work. It doesn't actually bear good fruit. It doesn't actually give us what we want. It can oftentimes give us more of what we don't want. How do you think about these counterintuitive physics and the way that flowing with the current of events ends up getting us further, even though our instinct a lot oftentimes is to try to meet things head on and bash against them?
The mechanics, a very interesting question. What images come to mind is like two fighters fighting against each other, and one having a calmness where he can respond to the situation as it arises, to the swings the opponent brings to him. And the other one losing himself in rage. Very powerful, yeah. Very strong swings you can take, yeah. But it narrows your optionality. It narrows down your view. If you lose yourself in resistance, if you lose yourself in anger, if you lose yourself in rage, it feels very powerful. It can be very powerful because you swing very hard, but you will not recognize your environment, your surroundings. You will not recognize other options you might have, which would yield a much better outcome, maybe also a win of the fight, just because you narrowed down, you won't see these options. So it can be very effective being in rage and throwing a swing, but in all the possible universes, I guess the mechanics of it leans towards not resisting, not being in rage, but trusting on your training and trusting on your instincts, trusting on your reactions will yield a better result in more possible universes if you would schedule it up and make tests with it. So that's at least the intuition I have about it. Therefore, failure is an opportunity, because if you see it that way, you will always look at the possibilities the failure will yield. So you will see the opportunities which arise through your failure. You will see and analyze the system behind it. How did it come to that failure even, and how can I mitigate it arising again? It is the possibility to learn from the pain, which is the simplest but most effective loop in evolving yourself. You feel the pain, you recognize what caused the pain, you analyze it and recognize the pain was due to my action that I did because of a thing that I did interpret wrongly. And therefore, I cut myself, I bumped into a chair, whatever. Maybe I broke a relationship or whatever. And then it is through the introspection in that pain, you ask yourself, why? Why? The 5 why method. You try to get to the root cause. And if you can solve the root cause by adapting your own behavior or your own way how you relate it, then you will evolve because you gained a principle which will be very valuable if you integrate it into your skill stack. If you fall back because you trained it, because you know how it hurts, and you know now how it came to be that it hurts, and you know now how to adapt your own behavior so that in the future it will not hurt anymore because you're better off and smarter as you began. So failure is always the opportunity, and in interrelation with other people as well. And therefore, you can put the demand on yourself. You don't wish others to be different because probably you cannot change other people simply through your wishing, not through your patience, not through your berating others. They will not change, but you can change the demand you have on others. So, and that's why I referred earlier to it being similar to forgiveness, because you know now that you have agency, you can change things. You can change how you interpret things. And releasing the demand you have on others makes you better off because you will not lose yourself in the illusion that demanding things of others will change what they do, what they think.
Mhm. Mm.
Have less delusion. And Peyton, how do you think that helps?
Mm. You make some really good points. And the agency one is worth highlighting, and that if we blame others, we are reducing our agency. Full stop. And it doesn't mean that we aren't truthful with ourselves about the role that somebody else played in something that happened. That can be an honest assessment of the situation. But maybe blaming others or not blaming others has something to do with I should have seen the risk there in who I trusted. I should have seen that I should have put more attention myself on this critical aspect of it. Or I learned this lesson from what happened that I wasn't expecting. The blaming others, there's no end to the blame. The failure is the opportunity. It's so true that if we blame others, it stunts our learning, it stunts our growth, it stunts the opportunity that we would have to grow from this experience. There's this common cliche that those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. I think the version that's more true and more practical of that is he who doesn't admit his own mistakes to himself are doomed to repeat them.
Yeah.
I noticed that most of the times if I repeated a mistake, it's because the first time I made it, I was denying that I made this mistake or not wanting to look at it or wanting to blame it on something else. It is taking ownership of our own errors and the cause and effect of our own decisions, no matter if it involves other people or not. Those decisions may be trusting a certain person or putting a certain person in a certain role where they weren't set up to succeed. They can involve other people, but own our own mistakes, learn from our own mistakes, embrace our own mistakes, admit our own mistakes to ourselves and out in the open. This is the only way that we can actually move forward and be wiser the next time that we come around to the same situation.
Mhm.
It- the last thing that comes to me here is this this dichotomy of choices that we make over and over in these different decisions or in our mindsets in certain areas that runs through this, which is, do we focus on what we want to manifest, or do we focus on what we are resisting, what we don't want? Do we focus on the good and the vision and the possibility and the path that we are trying to orient ourselves toward without trying to control, but with intention? Or do we fixate on the things that we don't like about the past and the present? Do we focus our energy on resistance? And our capacity to choose to orient toward the good rather than orient toward resistance of the bad is upstream of our capacity to manifest the good. And ironically, resisting what we don't want oftentimes yields exactly more of what we don't want. If I resist conflict in my own mind and I struggle against having to deal with conflict, I will actually make my mind a noisier place and a more frustrated place and a more irritable place. And I will lash out in ways that will perpetuate conflict and not give me peace. But if I orient myself toward peace and wanting peace, and recognizing that there are ways that I can access even a taste of peace and looking at what can bring me peace. This is a way that can actually bear the fruit of what I seek. And this applies to all kinds of things. And even catching ourselves fixating and resisting what we do not want, this is an opportunity. If we can bring awareness and say, okay, I recognize that I'm fixated on what I don't like about this and that. How can I invert this? How can I focus on what I do want? And in that recognition of the intention of the vision, then a lot of times the path to get from here to there clarifies itself and even lays itself out in front of us. This, I think, is where we can reclaim so much of our agency in totally admitting all the ways that we ourselves made decisions and took actions that led to everything that happened in our past and exactly where we stand here. Even though, of course, some of it is outside of our control, or much of it is outside of our control and unforeseen, and involving others, and involving unforeseen things that other people have done, perhaps. All of those things may be true, but let us accept this. Let us have a wise relationship with the reality in which we find ourselves. Let us have a relationship with it that gives us agency, that gives us more of what our intentions are, rather than staring into the wall we don't want to drive into and accidentally turning the steering wheel more toward it. What are
Mhm.
your intentions this week out of this? I think mine are these to accept, to focus on the good intentions rather than the resistance, and to do what I need to do and demand nothing of others. I think this is something that honestly I need. There's freedom and agency in this,
Mhm.
and so I'm hoping to carry this with me in the week to come. What about you? What are your intentions out of this?
My intentions are to feel the pains that I feel now thoroughly and ask what systematic cause and effect relationship is underlying there. And then implement a system which is tailor made for me and solve that. So I have a system in mind. I already sketched out the prototype where I have effective pomodores where I every time set an intention. And after the pomodoro is finished, it will prompt me to move a little, at least 1 minute. That will keep my health afloat. That will help me through sitting too long on my computer and working too much. Always keep health in the front and as a priority, because this is what is the basis of everything else. Good decision making requires a good.
That's right.
That's my intention. Well, nice
Good,
talk
man.
to you. See you soon, Peyton.
See you soon, my friend. Enjoyed it as always. Have a great week.